The billionaire was a man who lived by rules. Control, precision, routine, these were the pillars of his world. Every corner of his vast mansion, every tick of his schedule, every person in his employment, all moved to the rhythm he set. He was the one who knew everything, the one who held all the strings. But lately, something was off. Single thread had come loose, and it was beginning to unravel him. His maid, a quiet, hard-working woman who had served his family for years, had started acting strangely. At first, the changes were small, easy to dismiss. A kitchen door left ajar, a corner of the living room overlooked during cleaning. But then, the changes became harder to ignore. She began sneaking out of the mansion at night. Her movements were cautious, her steps light, as if she were a ghost trying not to disturb the living. The billionaire's sharp eyes, trained to catch the smallest inconsistency, locked onto this new, unsettling pattern. What started as simple curiosity quickly grew into concern, and then, slowly, ripened into suspicion. Why the secrecy? Was she in some kind of trouble? Or was it something more sinister? He noticed she carried a small bag each night, always tucked carefully under her coat. The contents were a mystery, but her secrecy made him deeply uneasy. He'd always trusted his staff implicitly, but now doubt was a constant, unwelcome guest in his mind. He found himself observing her, pretending to be absorbed in his work while secretly watching her from the grand windows overlooking the garden. He saw her walk to the gate, her head swiveling nervously, before she slipped into the dimly lit streets, swallowed by the night. The silence of the city seemed to conspire with her, hiding her every step. With each departure, the billionaire's heart beat a little faster, torn between anger at her secrets and a growing fear of what he might uncover. He started to think about her life beyond the mansion walls, realizing with a jolt that he didn't truly know her at all. He'd seen her smile, heard her quiet laughter, and listened to small stories about her family. But now he understood there were hidden layers to her life he'd never even imagined. Questions flooded his mind, each one more troubling than the last. Where was she going? What was in that bag? Who was she meeting? Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. Every creak of the old house made him jump, wondering if she had returned without his knowledge. His legendary calm was gone, replaced by a restless, nervous energy. He had navigated treacherous business deals and high-stakes negotiations, but this quiet mystery, this enigma living under his own roof, disturbed him more than any corporate battle. He decided he could no longer just watch from a distance. The anxiety was too much. He had to know what she was doing. He had to follow her, but he knew he had to be careful. She was clever, and if she spotted him, the truth might be lost forever. That night, he dressed in dark clothes, moving with a silence that mirrored her own. He waited, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement, until he saw her slip out of the mansion gate. Following her through the quiet streets, keeping a safe distance, he was struck by how precise she was. Every step was deliberate. Every glance around seemed to measure the shadows for danger. She stopped briefly at a small park, her nervousness palpable, before continuing on her way. She moved with a confidence that surprised him, a familiarity with the city's hidden paths. Despite the secrecy, he could sense a purpose to her journey, a powerful reason that drove her out into the night. A flicker of admiration sparked within him. He had been so quick to judge, but the care she took on her mission earned his respect. The night air was cool, the city mostly asleep. His footsteps were soft echoes in the dark as he stayed in the shadows, moving from wall to tree to parked car. His mind raced with scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. He fought the urge to confront her, a voice inside telling him to wait, to see the whole story. He'd learned in business that patience reveals the truth, and he applied that same discipline now. Hours seemed to pass. He watched her pause outside small buildings, her eyes scanning for something or someone. She entered a narrow alley he'd never noticed before, disappearing for a few minutes before re-emerging with the same quiet determination. He was beginning to understand that he had grossly underestimated her world, her courage, and her resolve. This night, he sensed, would reveal a story far from ordinary. It would be filled with secrets and emotions he could never have predicted. His curiosity burned brighter than ever, and though the truth was still hidden, he felt a strange connection forming. A bond that was about to be tested by the revelations to come. The billionaire followed quietly, keeping a safe distance as the maid moved through the empty streets. His heart still raced, a mix of curiosity, anxiety, and something he had never expected, admiration. She walked with a calm purpose, despite the secrecy of the night. Her footsteps were soft but determined, each one carrying a weight he couldn't yet understand. He noticed the small bag she carried pressed close to her body. And for the first time, he wondered what could be inside. Documents, clothes, money, or something even more personal. Every shadow in the street seemed to hide another secret. Every passing light made him tense. He had never imagined that following someone could feel like entering a completely different world, one that existed right alongside his own life of luxury and control. She paused at a narrow alley, glancing over her shoulder, and the billionaire held his breath, fearing she might notice him. But she continued, slipping into the alley with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. He saw the alley opened into a small, modest clinic, one he had never seen or heard of before. She entered quietly, her movements careful, as if she didn't want anyone to see her. He stayed hidden behind a corner, peering inside through the small window, and his eyes widened in surprise. Inside, the maid greeted a doctor with a warm smile, her voice soft but filled with respect. She handed over a small amount of money, her face serious, and watched as the doctor carefully reviewed the papers she had brought. It became clear to the billionaire that she was here not for herself, but for someone else, someone vulnerable, someone in need. The realization struck him like lightning, and he felt a pang of guilt for ever doubting her intentions. She left the clinic quietly, but instead of heading home, she walked toward a nearby shelter. Her steps slowed slightly, as if she was carrying a heavier weight than he had imagined. The shelter was modest, with soft lights glowing from inside, and as she entered, he saw women of all ages waiting. Some sat quietly, others looked anxious. The maid moved among them with a gentle authority, handing out small packages of food, blankets, and essential supplies. She spoke to them softly, reassuring them, helping them feel safe in a world that often ignored their struggles. The billionaire's heart began to ache as he watched her selflessness unfold before him. He had assumed she was hiding something selfish, something shameful, but instead, he saw courage, compassion, and sacrifice. He continued following her at a distance, careful not to be seen. His mind raced with thoughts about his own life, his wealth, his power. Yet, here was a woman with nothing compared to him, giving everything she had to help others. Each step she took, each smile she offered, made him question everything he had believed about kindness, trust, and human values. He realized that wealth could not measure the true value of a person. And for the first time, he felt humility, a sensation both strange and powerful. As the night grew darker, she moved from room to room, attending to women who seemed scared, tired, and forgotten. The billionaire could see her gently comforting a woman who cried quietly, her hand steady, her voice soft, yet firm. She helped another woman with medical supplies, explaining everything with patience. Her care was quiet, but intense, her dedication absolute. He had never seen anything like it, and he began to understand the weight she carried in her heart, the responsibility she bore not just for herself, but for so many others. Finally, after what felt like hours, the maid gathered her supplies and prepared to leave. The billionaire noticed how exhausted she looked, her steps slower now, but still steady, still purposeful. He felt a strange sense of awe and admiration, mixed with guilt for ever thinking she could be acting selfishly. That night, as he continued to follow her, he realized that the story he was witnessing was more than a secret. It was a revelation, a glimpse into a life filled with courage, selflessness, and quiet heroism. He followed her silently as she left the shelter, his mind racing. He'd expected something ordinary, maybe a secret meeting or a hidden stash of cash. But what he was about to discover would change everything. She moved with quiet determination toward a small, dimly lit building on the edge of the city, a place most people had forgotten. Her steps were careful, but he sensed an urgency in her movements, a weight far greater than anything he had witnessed so far. As she entered, he stayed hidden, peering through a cracked window, his heart heavy with anticipation. The room inside was filled with women, their faces reflecting pain, fear, and exhaustion. But when the maid walked in, their eyes brightened. Her presence brought a comfort he never imagined she could command. He watched as she knelt beside a young woman in distress, speaking softly, offering a small package. Tears streamed down the young woman's face, and a lump formed in his throat. He realized then that she wasn't just hiding her own pregnancy. She was hiding a mission. She was sacrificing her own rest, her own safety, to care for these women. He watched her move from one person to another, distributing medicine, blankets, and food. Every action was deliberate, precise, and full of compassion. It was clear she was the backbone of this small sanctuary, a silent hero carrying the weight of others' pain on her own shoulders. He felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration. Guilt for ever doubting her, and admiration for the courage she showed. Even in her own vulnerable state, she put others first, her pregnancy hidden behind a calm exterior. He noticed the most heartbreaking part. These women had nowhere else to go. They were abandoned, alone, struggling with situations society had ignored. And here she was, risking everything every night, offering hope without expecting anything in return. The sheer scale of her sacrifice struck him deeply. He had always thought of wealth as power, the ability to control the world. But this woman, with no fortune or title, had an impact far greater than anything he had ever achieved. He realized that real strength wasn't measured in money or status, but in empathy and courage. Suddenly, one of the women collapsed from exhaustion. The maid immediately knelt beside her, her voice calm but firm as she checked her pulse and called for help. Her hands were steady, even as her own body must have been aching from the strain of her pregnancy. He was stunned. The sheer resilience, the bravery, the kindness in this one person was overwhelming. He felt tears prick his eyes, emotions he had long suppressed in his pursuit of wealth. For the first time, he saw the world differently through the eyes of someone who gave everything. As she finished helping the women and prepared to leave, he wanted to confront her, to praise her, to ask how she managed it all. But he stayed hidden, afraid of frightening her. He understood this secret journey was sacred. He had started the night with suspicion, but now he was filled with awe and a deep sense of humility. This was more than a secret mission. It was a lesson in humanity. As she stepped out into the quiet night, carrying her small bag, he followed her once more. He knew the next steps of her journey, and the truth he was about to uncover would shake his world to its core. He had no idea that what he would discover next wouldn't just make him cry, would change the way he viewed life, compassion, and what it truly meant to be powerful. He waited in the shadows, his heart pounding not with curiosity anymore, but with something heavier, something he couldn't ignore. The billionaire watched as his maid left the shelter. He had followed her to witness her secret acts of kindness, and now he could no longer stay hidden. The emotions were overwhelming admiration, guilt, awe, and an unexpected tenderness he had never known. He knew he had to speak to her, but he feared shattering the quiet trust she showed in her mission. Finally, he stepped forward, his footsteps soft against the cobblestone street. She turned abruptly, her eyes wide with surprise, but not fear. There was recognition in her gaze, and in that moment, he saw a quiet strength radiating from her very being. He cleared his throat, his voice gentle. "I have been following you," he admitted, seeing a flicker of shock on her face. "I wanted to understand, to see what you've been doing." Silence fell, heavy and charged. The maid's face was unreadable, a mix of caution and curiosity. She had always been so careful, and yet here he was, the man she served, revealing he had seen everything. He expected anger, but instead she simply nodded, as if she always knew this day would come. She motioned for him to walk beside her, and together they moved through the quiet streets. The night air was cool, calming after the storm of his emotions. He began to speak, his words awkward at first. I thought you were hiding something for yourself, something wrong? But now I see. I see how much you give, how much you sacrifice. I have judged you unfairly." His voice trembled with the weight of his own ignorance. The maid listened quietly, her expression softening. When he paused, she spoke, her voice calm and steady. "I had to do it quietly," she said. "If anyone knew, they might have stopped me. And these women. They need someone who can be there without hesitation, without judgment." He was struck by her simple, powerful words. He realized his wealth and influence, which he'd always considered strength, were meaningless compared to her courage and compassion. He reflected on his own life, the endless meetings, the deals, the pursuit of more. Suddenly, it all seemed hollow. He had been chasing power and control, while she had been chasing humanity and hope. A surge of humility washed over him. For the first time, he shared something personal. "I've lived my life believing I must always be in control. That power is everything. But tonight, you've taught me otherwise," he confessed, feeling a release in speaking the truth. The maid looked at him, a small knowing smile on her face. She nodded, but her focus remained on the women she helped. He realized this humility, this recognition of her strength, was the beginning of his own transformation. They continued walking, an unexpected bond forming between them. Not one of employer and maid, but of two people recognizing the heart of another. He began to ask questions, not to judge, but to understand. She answered with honesty and patience, explaining how she had organized small shelters, collected supplies, and quietly helped women who had no one. She shared stories of struggle, resilience, and hope, and he listened, absorbing every detail. Each story made him reflect more deeply on his own priorities, and tears pricked his eyes. By the time they returned to the quiet streets near his mansion, the billionaire understood that this night had changed him forever. The confrontation had not been about anger, but about truth and compassion. He had witnessed something extraordinary, and he knew he could no longer live as he had before. As the maid turned to leave, he called out to her gently, promising to support her, to help, not to control, but to assist. He finally understood that true power wasn't about wealth or dominance, but about using what you have to make a difference in someone's life. The night was quiet, but the billionaire's mind was racing. After following his maid and witnessing her secret acts of kindness, he felt a profound change. Something had shifted. A part of him he didn't even know existed had awakened. He realized that all his wealth, power, and luxury were meaningless if they couldn't touch the lives of others. Standing beside the woman who had shown him the true meaning of compassion, he knew he had to act not for recognition, but to support the life she had quietly built. The next morning, he invited her to the mansion, not with the voice of an employer, but with one of respect. She arrived cautiously, unsure what to expect, but a sense of trust was already growing between them. He spoke honestly, explaining that he had seen her secret journey, the shelter, the care she provided to struggling women, and the incredible sacrifices she made, all while pregnant herself. Her eyes widened in surprise, then softened with understanding. She never imagined he would not only see, but also appreciate her quiet work. He offered his help, not to control her mission, but to expand it, to make her work easier and to reach more women in need. The maid hesitated. Could someone with so much privilege truly understand the struggles of the women she helped? But he insisted, promising he would respect her leadership and never interfere. He would only assist, provide resources, and ensure her efforts reached further than she ever dreamed. Slowly she agreed, realizing this was a chance to help more people without risking her safety or secrecy. Together, they began organizing the shelter, improving conditions, and expanding support for women who had no one else. He watched as she trained volunteers, distributed supplies, and comforted those in pain. He marveled at her strength, her courage, and her natural leadership. He was learning from her, observing how even small acts of kindness could transform lives, and how compassion and patience could overcome fear and despair. For the first time, his life of luxury felt purposeful. He could finally use his resources for something that truly mattered. Over time, the bond between them grew, not as employer and employee, but as two people connected by empathy, trust, and a shared purpose. He was humbled by her resilience, amazed at how she managed to care for so many while carrying the weight of her own pregnancy. The women in the shelter flourished under her guidance, their lives changing in ways that brought hope, joy, and dignity. The billionaire realized he was learning a lesson far more valuable than any he had ever gained in business. He was learning how to be human. The maid, once quiet and secretive, now felt supported and empowered. She no longer had to work in the shadows, yet her humility remained. She taught him about courage, about giving without expectation, and about the extraordinary impact of small, consistent acts of kindness. In turn, the billionaire offered resources, guidance, and protection, ensuring that no one went hungry, scared, or alone. Together, they created a ripple effect of hope that spread far beyond what either had imagined. On quiet nights, he often reflected on that first evening when he followed her, expecting a simple secret, but discovering a world of courage, compassion, and humanity. That night had changed everything: his perspective, his heart, and his purpose. He had learned that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in love, empathy, and the ability to make a difference. As he watched the maid continue her work, smiling, giving, and inspiring, he felt a profound gratitude. Her courage had not only saved lives, but had also transformed his own, leaving him with a heart forever changed. In the end, both their lives were richer not in wealth, but in meaning, connection, and the extraordinary power of human kindness. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content.